And you're watching NDTV Prime in association with Micromax. Nothing like anything.
The Realty Debate with Manisha Natarajan, powered by Reliance Home Finance.
Recently, an observation was made by the Supreme Court that housing projects must get environment clearance before work can start. And this news made it to the front page of national dailies. This was simply an observation made on a case belonging to Tamil Nadu, where a group of 7 developers had started construction without approvals, environment approvals to be precise. This was not a blanket observation on the business of real estate in India. Developers across the country by law cannot begin work or construction work without environment clearances. But as always, such a headline news was met with a lot of skepticism by the common man, who believes that builders often flout green norms. Builders, on the other hand, say that the environment clearance process is cumbersome, time-consuming, and, look at the figure, escalates the cost of your house by 30% or so. And despite promises by the NDA government, this still remains a big bone of contention. Today on the Realty Debate, we thrash out the green processes for India's real estate sector. Do we have enough checks and balances in place, or do we have too many? Joining me today on the debate, let me bring you the names first. We've got Gitambar Anand joining us. He's the head CMD of ATS Infrastructure Limited and President CREDAI. Also Tanmay Tathagat, Director Environmental Design Solutions. Dr. Vandana Shiva, Environmental Activist. Mayur Shah, Managing Director Marathon Group. Ajit Kumar Chodia from Chennai, Managing Director Olympia Infratech Private Limited and President CREDAI Chennai. Ajit, I'm going to start with you because we are basing this on that big news on an observation by the Supreme Court. Literally, it made it to the headlines, making people believe that maybe builders and developers do not take environmental clearances before starting to build. How misplaced is this idea?
If you see, it has got to be region specific. It cannot be a generalized statement that developers don't take environment clearance. If you look at Tamil Nadu, we have had long periods when this particular committee, the SCIIA itself, was not constituted. And like you yourself said, the delay in getting the environment clearance adds to the cost. Thereafter, there have been also some ambiguities with respect to deemed approvals. There is also an ambiguity with respect to the 20,000 square meter. You could start the construction, you could not start the construction, or you need to get approval only after you cross 20,000. So it is a situation which has been compounded by multiple issues. More so, it has been because of the delay in getting the environment clearances. The developers would have been compelled to start construction a little early.
Is that so? All right, Gitambar, so let me come back to a little away from that case. What is the situation today? Does every building, house or flat, before it's built, need an environment clearance in the country, especially in the metros? Or is there a certain size above which you need a clearance?
So, so let me first put the entire discussion in perspective. Every development above 20,000 square meters needs an environment clearance in the country, and the developer community is getting it. So let me go back, Manisha, when the center stopped giving clearances and empowered the states by setting up these environment assessment committees in the state itself.
Okay.
So the procedure was such that the state would nominate a 3-member committee, and that committee, the names of that committee would be sent to the central government MOEF. The central government would okay that file and say, fine, you can go ahead and form a committee with these 3 names.
Okay.
And that file would then become, that okay would become a gazette and be sent back to the state. Now this entire procedure would take a minimum of a year, year and a half. In case in the interim, suppose one of the members, they were passed away or probably didn't want to continue, or something happened, was not medically fit to continue, then the entire process had to be repeated, which would mean another year and a half. So what is happening now is that various states do have these committees, but in many states the committees either are in a state of transition where the members are being changed. So this entire process, like I said, takes a year and a half. So what happened in Chennai was, the developer bought his land, he got his plans sanctioned from the municipal bodies in the right way. Okay. All permissions were taken, and then he applied for environment clearance to the State Environment Impact Assessment Committee, right, which was not existent. A year happened, a year and a half happened. So then, they went back to the corporation and said, can we start the work, because we don't know when this is going to be formed, this committee. So I believe, from what I hear, is that the municipal corporation, the sanctioning authority, told them, yes, you go ahead with your construction, and when this committee is formed, you can apply for your clearances again at that point in time. This is what happened over there, but this is not true. It's not true to say that developers are starting work without requisite environmental clearances. This is absolutely wrong. Let me give you another thing. The central government recently, the MOEF, has tweaked this 20,000 square feet for, if you're making a factory, this doesn't have to be, the limit is not 20,000 square meters, it is now 150,000 square meters. If you're making a factory. If you're making a hospital, it is exempt. Again, it's 150,000. So various hotels, you don't have to go for it. But for making a residential complex, factory is exempt up to 150,000. But for making a residential complex, if it is more than 20,000 square meters, it has that, you have to go back to this committee and take this permission. Okay. What we have represented is
hold your thought.
That we know what is required.
We'll come to what is it that you would like? I mean, what is it that will make your business easier to do? I think, let me get a reaction on this very, very critical fact. Vandana, Shiva, you're with us. The whole change which has happened, MOEF last year, January, has changed the norms for industry for Make in India, saying that, look, not 20,000 square meter, but 150,000 square meter. However, for housing, it hasn't been changed, though High Court has observed that housing is a non-polluting industry. Is there fairness in this process, or do you think that there isn't fairness?
Well, I think the first thing is, in terms of the Tamil Nadu builders, the point was that the NGT, the National Green Tribunal, had actually fined the builders, and then the Supreme Court had put a bench, and the observation of the Supreme Court now under Justice Thakur was that was a mistake. You cannot put a stay to allow activities that have harm for the environment and have impact on people. And the language used was pollution, which is too narrow a language when we're talking about environmental impact. The main point is this: a factory, if it's built in a drainage system, will cause the same damage. And the Chennai floods are there for us as a clear lesson that many of these places were factories, industrial zones, of course, new high-rise buildings for residences. And I think everything we do in India on town planning should be informed by the lessons we should learn from the Chennai floods. Our most eminent town planner, architect K.T. Ravindran has called it the geographies of disaster. 1.5 illegal structures, illegal in the sense they didn't have the environmental clearances, buried 300 water bodies. If you've lived in the Deccan, you've lived in Karnataka, and I have, I was at the Bangalore Institute of Science and Institute of Management, or in Tamil Nadu or Andhra, this Deccan area gets its water through these amazing systems of interlinked tank, a most important hydrological system. Now, along the coast, with the drainage system narrowing down into Chennai, blocking that drainage and preventing the absorption of water in times of extreme floods, which we'll have more of with the climate change, you're making a recipe for disaster. I think the government definitely needs to move beyond fragmented planning. We have to have integrated planning, and we can't just have one kind of building subjected to law and other kinds, not if they both do the damage, but more importantly, now that we are in the era of so-called smart cities, let's be ecologically smart. Let's not create disasters like Chennai, which cost the public 50,000 to a lakh crores of damages. And we are seeing this more and more.
Right.
I am particularly happy that my beloved Dehradun, my hometown, my birthplace, did not make it in the current proposal of a smart city, because they're going to chop down the watershed, the catchment zone of the river Asan and the last green lung. So we need to be thinking much more about what does it do to water systems and hydrological systems, recharge as well as drainage. What does it do to increasing levels of automobile
All right,
flow?
Vandana Shiva.
All of these are vital, and I think the life of the people comes before any particular sector's margin of profits.
Okay, so I get that point, larger point, but I think the big takeaway is on the Chennai case, Vandana Shiva, your point is that the NGT had already stayed the construction and there was no reason to actually do away with it. Tanmay Tathagat, do you believe that in this case, you know, it's not okay to just say we got environmental clearances were stuck? That's a larger problem which the industry needs a resolution to, but it was full of fraud and risk to start the project by just clearances by the municipal body.
That's absolutely right. That and Ajit's answer says that they really knew the risks they were taking. It is a problem where any clearance is not taken before construction, but especially with the environmental case, because there are many things that the environmental regulations require you to do that cannot be done after construction is started. So there is no retrospective way to address such problems. So in no case that rule or norm can be flouted.
Okay.
At the same time, there has to be a mechanism that ensures that the time which is given for clearance, which any developer or any project will take into account in planning their processes, including their commitment to the buyers, are met.
Okay. So the time of approval is really critical. Mayur, Shah, come in here. I mean, we're discussing the Supreme Court observation in the Chennai case where the developers, where it observed that this was not the right way to go ahead with development without environmental clearances. Wait out for us. I mean, projects do require anything above 20,000 square meters does require an environmental clearance. Is it a practice? Is it more a norm rather than exception that because clearances take so long, more often than not, developers actually have no other choice but to start work without getting the clearances?
No, not at all. I think in Mumbai or MMR region where we are operating, hardly anyone will ever start getting a prior environmental clearance. This was a very exceptional case which I think the Supreme Court was addressing, and where the committees are sometimes not sitting for 1.5 years and all, and the state government takes that call. Because if you, Manisha, strictly speaking, during construction, there is hardly any pollution happening. As a matter of fact, this entire environmental clearance was drafted for an industrial kind of an act, because it's have a word terminology like consent to operate, consent to establish. These are not really a standard construction project kind of a terms. But I think I'll just leave aside there that particular point, that construction projects were ad hocly added into this environmental clearance, are not giving enough thought into it. That is what my opinion is. But however, prior environmental clearances are taken by all the developers, and we really require a very speedy environmental clearance system. The Act says it is not more than 104 days at any point of time. So after submitting all EMP program, environmental impact study, all those things which are required and which are already submitted to the committee, if 104 days have gone or 1.5 years have gone, there must be some remedy available to a developer or a constructor to do something on the projects.
Okay, fair enough. Tanmay, have you studied the kind of clearances which developers are supposed to follow before they get the clearance? Where is the gap? I mean, why are there blockages? Are developers not doing their part, or is it really the way Mr. Gitambar Anand laid it out for us that, there's a 3-member committee, they have to clear it, then it comes to the MOEF, it goes back. The process itself is so cumbersome. What are the big blockages according to you, and how can it be? How can they be resolved?
The process that he talked about was for appointing the committee. So that is a case that's not a norm. So once a committee is there, the process is fairly straightforward. Nowadays, you're required for a large project to first get the basic terms of your study. So you're supposed to go and get an approval of my site, this is my project, and they gave you the terms of reference that these are the environmental parameters that you need to analyze for a certain period of time, which can be from 3 months to 6 months to a year sometimes, depending on the kind of site and the project that you need to evaluate.
And these are all laid out at every state level?
Yes, well, that's the process. So the committee is supposed to tell the project proponent that these are the things that are critical for your project. You get this data, get this information, process and come back to us, including at that point of time, the environmental impact of the project, what are the remediation measures, what are the resources that are being committed to take care of all the problems, as well as the overall impact of the project in a larger radius. They look at a 10-kilometer radius for the impact of a construction project even,
Absolutely.
Which is all it's laid out very well. The problem is that within the structure of this process, the states are supposed to manage all of this. And there is a huge variation in how a committee in one state looks at it versus another one. What are the specific requirements that they lay out? Because the project and the whole legal process does not say there is a specific remedy for every action, right? This is left up to the technical committee to evaluate. So sometimes for the same project, you'll have a very different requirement from another one. So in a nutshell, you do have to go through the process. The committee looks at it and they makes a recommendation that the project be approved or not approved.
Okay.
It's then sent to the government for the final signature. So the committee itself is a fairly technical and rigorous committee. It is made of hydrogeologists, people who are from the landscape part, people who look at the overall watershed.
So does it need to come to the center again?
No, it does not.
There's a question.
It does not need to come to the center unless it is a specific project where the environmental committee feels that it needs to refer it to the center. Otherwise, it's all supposed to be taken care at the state level. So technically, if the committees meet regularly, if the process is done, it does not take more than 3 to 6 months to do this. It's still not within 100 days, but it does take 3 to 6 months. But in many states and many cities where there are a number of projects or more and the committees are in transition, you see these delays. So for this reason, in the last year, the MOEF had come out with prescriptive measures, which are one way of addressing this. Because you know the construction project type, you can come up with a list of 30 things, 40 things, 100 things and say that as long as you satisfy us that you are doing all of these, you can go ahead and do the process in a shortened application. I think that is what one of the other cases where there is a stay and the ruling is that you cannot actually do a prescriptive list. This has to be seen on a project by project basis.
Okay, Mr. Chodia, would you agree with Tanmay Tathagat that rather than make you go through technical committees, why not have a list of maybe 30, 40, 50, 80, 100 criteria, which then the developers undertake to actually observe and follow? What is the solution according to you of this entire, rigmarole of delays on environment clearances?
Madam, if we really go through the environment clearances which have been given by a particular authority, if you go through about 100 approvals which have been given, almost all are mechanical, almost cut, copy and paste. That is the situation today. In spite of that, if each and every project proponent has to make an application, wait for this particular process to go, whether they are... See, again he said the terms of reference today, it is only if it is in excess of 150,000 square meter that the TOR needs to be set, and then you need to go to a second stage. But majority of the projects which come for EC are less than 150,000 square meter. And for that, we just don't see any reason, because 90% of the conditions which are there, I would say why 99% of the conditions which are there are cut, copy and paste. They are exactly similar. The wordings could be a little bit here and there varying it. There is no difference. More so after the Kasturi Rangan committee's recommendation which is there. So almost all the parameters which are there are standard. So if that is the case, if this were to be made as a part of the bylaws, you can do away with the environment clearance. I fully agree with Mayur when he said when an industry 15 lakh square feet of 150,000 square meter of industrial construction does not require prior EC. Why is it that in housing construction needs to be required?
Okay.
If an institution has absolutely without any cap does not require in prior environment clearance, why is it that in housing needs to be required? We are part of the local planning. The areas are planned areas. There is a water supply, drainage. The state government has prepared a scheme. If it is a 500 acre, 1000 acre new township, we can understand that there are a lot of issues which are there. If not, everything is supposed to be within the control of the state government. How is it that an individual property, how can I change the contours of the land which I have?
Okay.
If there is water supply, water supply is there.
Hold that thought there. We've completely run out of time on this segment. We have to come back, gentlemen. But how can developers change the contour of the land? I think a lot of, if the developer is not conscious, or an industry is not conscious, it's not just about construction or housing, it's not about industry. I think anybody who's not conscious can change the contours of the land in a big way. We'll come back. This debate is extremely interesting. Do we have too many checks and balances when it comes to environmental clearances for real estate, or do we have too little? We've established that right now we may have checks and balances which are the right amount, but the fact of the matter is that they're just taking too long. It's harming both the developers and the homeowner, where the costs are getting escalated. But what is the other way to actually balance out both preserving our nature and environment with development? This is an extremely important debate. We'll be back in just a moment.
The Realty Debate with Manisha Natarajan, powered by Reliance Home Finance.
Welcome back. We are looking at the real estate and environmental clearance debate. What is the basis of making housing projects go through the same environmental approval processes as any other industrial project? And now with the new rules, actually you have tougher norms for housing than you have for industrial projects. Gitambar Anand, I stopped you at that point where you started mentioning this point that, look, for industries now you've given an exemption up to 1,50,000 square meters. But for housing projects, you've still kept it at 20,000 square meters. And this is gross injustice. Don't you think that both should have been kept at 20,000? I mean, we still do need to keep environmental clearances as an extremely critical, important part of any development in the country.
See, as a general, I would say that our industry definitely is not, prone to violate and maul the environment, because we also understand our future generations will live a much better life if environment is conserved overall. Now, 20,000 or 1,50,000, what we would say is, keeping this thing in mind that environment must be conserved and it's an important issue. What must be done is, like we have for other norms, like for fire norms, etc., we are given a set of rules to follow and implement in the project. And before they give an occupancy certificate, they can come and verify whether we've done it or not. And if we've not done it, don't give us an occupancy certificate, penalize us like it is done for other clearances. It's as simple as that. It should be made a part of the general bylaws. Why must we first go to a window and wait for 1.5 years? And a window means a window, and we all know what that means. Why can't we just be given a set of rules to follow, implement in the project, and be verified by whichever authority before an occupancy certificate is issued? It's as simple as that.
Vandana, Shiva, would you agree with that?
No, I don't, because you're not just selling an apartment for safety of the future occupants. Then having your self-certification on the fire extinguisher is fine. You're putting up a building, and if we keep talking about the environment as a general term, we'll never get anywhere. We need to go back to Chennai. It was buildings identified again and again by anyone who has kept track of it. It was new rash of buildings that aggravated the flooding of Chennai.
Vandana Shiva, okay.
No, but
what
I want to say, they keep saying about we don't maul the environment. Well, that was a mauling of Chennai, and it was not a new city, but you mauled an ancient city and destroyed its hydrological
Okay, Vandana
system.
Shiva, when you say you, let's be also, I'm not taking any sides here, but let's be clear, it was an entire city also involved in it, in the sense that there were metro route which was being built over and above the drainages. So I think it would be
all construction, that's the point.
Yeah,
construction that is blind to the logic of water will cause damage.
Okay,
and
so give me a solution. Give me a solution.
No, I think the solution I'm giving is they keep talking about the delay. I think the crisis that we are in, and again Chennai shows us how deep a crisis is, the floods in Delhi, the earlier 2010 floods in Bombay show that blocking drainage is a consequence of building blindly.
Is it a master planning issue?
No, not only. It's about an ecological ecosystem planning, and I think the way to
so
get
who should be doing it?
I think citizens have to become more active. Only participatory planning can solve this problem, because what you're affecting is the commons of the community. Water belongs to all. The flood impacts all. It's not just a building, an apartment sold to a family. It's about all of society being disrupted.
Okay.
And I don't think we can escape the participatory process, which will cut out your time, which will cut out the corruption. Transparency is the best solution. You're worried about 3 years. It can be done in 3 months if there are public hearings in every city on this issue.
Tanmay Tathagat coming here. Vandana is extremely passionate about it for the right reasons. We do need to preserve our environment for the future. But the larger issue here is that developers, metro construction, infrastructure, all is required. All is also given clearances. Everybody is involved in the clearances from the top to the bottom. These are cleared. It's not as if you can just buy a plot of land anywhere and start building. That's not true. Metro routes are charted out after much consideration. So all of it is happening from the top to the bottom, everyone involved in it, and a big need. My question is, how do you balance it?
Well, there are two important things that you can make out in this process. One, by this whole game of looking at 20,000 square meter, 150,000 square meter, you're somehow giving the impression that development, progress, smartness cannot happen along with environment, and they all are fighting with each other, and you gotta relax an environmental norm to actually make things work or for business to happen, which any developer will know it's not true. In fact, internationally, most projects and large developments that have really conserved environment in a very overt way have always appreciated more, have always had better users, better quality of life and everything. So especially when construction projects, there is no reason to even debate about this issue. Should we look at environmental issues or not? Second, I don't agree with the fact that the process of construction is not polluting, because the process of construction doesn't just include the process of construction of a structure there, which anyway causes dust and all the other issues because you're not covering things up properly, but also the entire supply chain. So when you make a house, the brick is being made in UP and somewhere else. So the entire supply chain is involved in that construction. You cannot just take the environmental impact of construction of that one thing on one side. But the second issue is, when a developer or an owner has a piece of land which has been zoned for construction, the major environmental impact has already happened. And that's what Vandana was saying, that at the time you decided to extend the city to Gurgaon. By the time you extended a highway to a certain place, that is the time a very rigorous environmental process is required. That's where you need to see, not just from a participation process, but from a purely scientific and a long-term effect. Is it going to... Because once you've zoned, like in Delhi now, we've zoned areas for development where there are wildlife sanctuaries, and in the future, in 20 years, there'll be institutions coming up. Now, these institutions will be asked to now figure out how to take care of monkeys in the Asola Wildlife Sanctuary.
Absolutely.
And now you've already zoned the area around it for development. how are you asking now a developer who's got maybe an acre to figure out what to do with the monkeys? So, you know, it has to be taken more seriously at the time you decide that a building, a structure, an area will be zoned for certain things. And that's the reason that...
So Tanmay, my question is, once it's zoned out, right?
Yeah.
So there is no thought which is going in that zoning process. Right?
No environmental consideration.
So no environmental consideration is happening. Now, I'm not saying who's guilty, who's not guilty, but isn't there where the problem begins?
Absolutely.
Who should be responsible for that zoning?
The planning authority at both the town and country planning, as regional plans, and then the city, all three are involved in this. And it has to start from there. Because unless you are taking care of this overall macro environmental issues, you cannot expect a site with even 100 acres to take care of a watershed, for example. It's not possible.
Let me give you one example. The Commonwealth Games, which will go down in history as a whole issue of corruption, we did a big Yamuna Satyagraha because they were building the Games village in the floodplain of the Yamuna.
And making it a green building.
Yeah, and this MRMGF, which is trying to get involved in the so-called Dehradun Green City by devastating our tea gardens. MRMGF was the one that got that contract. No apartments have been sold. It's a loss at every level to the public.
But the same thing is that government allowed that construction,
which is why,
knowing that. So,
we shouldn't allow big grand plans of government to be an excuse
so even
to destroy
before the developer came on board, you selected that land.
Absolutely.
So that's the process where at a larger level you've made a mistake. You've made an environmental blunder. Now the developer is also caught in the whole process. And of course, the developer now got a green building certified. But the problem is not gone. It's in fact getting worse.
All right. It's a really interesting thought that it's even the developers getting caught in this whole issue. So how do you actually untangle it? We've just had a list of 20 smart cities being announced. Can at least the new cities take care of the environment clearances in a way, or at least zoning and master planning in a way that we are able to create housing, meet that big goal of housing for all by 2022, and also preserve our environment? Last thoughts right after this break.
The Realty Debate with Manisha Natarajan, powered by Reliance Home Finance.
How many checks and balances are required to preserve our environment as we go towards that goal of creating housing for all by 2022? It's a big target. Gitambar Anand, you've been part of this discussion and debate, and the environmentalists feel extremely strongly about it, and we do need them to actually keep us sane, keep us all in, a certain way that we all continue to think about the environment. Tell me, with the new smart city concept, how do you think developers will also be part of that big project? How do you think for tomorrow's cities, the environment issues can be resolved?
See, Manisha, we are willing to partner with the environmentalists to find a solution to, development is required. And you require houses, you require office spaces. But please understand, nobody in the private sector will go and invest their money in a place where, you get your operation started on a zoned land, you get your map sanctioned, and suddenly, after 3 years when everything is up, you're told that this is all wrong and you just have to demolish the whole thing. It doesn't work that way. You will discourage the private sector from, participating and investing in the development of these smart cities. So therefore, a very practical, holistic, balanced solution has to be found. Otherwise, all that will be done is that, all private sector will think 100 times before investing even a rupee in any of these smart cities for development. So there has to be a very, very rational, holistic, balanced partnership between the environmentalists and the city planners, so that whatever is decided once and for all, it is sacrosanct. And people like us can go and invest their money without having any fear of or any threat of having to demolish any structure that we made on a so-called sanctioned map, sanctioned plan in a zoned land. So this is very important, because if this country has to grow, you need private investment, you need private participation for development, and you need development. Obviously, you need infrastructure, you need houses and everything.
Okay,
so
Mayur,
whatever is decided, it should be decided in the interest of the country.
So you're saying that don't change the rules of the game retrospectively. I think that's the biggest problem which is happening today.
Don't change the goalpost.
Don't chase the goalpost.
Yeah,
Okay,
don't chase the
goalpost. Mayur Shah, smart cities. We've got probably a chance to reinvent the way growth and environment will together be managed. What, I mean, if you had to be participant of the future growth, what would you want?
Yeah, I agree with the other panelists when they said that the proper master planning, zoning, and studying all environmental impact at the master plan level is the most important thing a smart city can achieve. So that all individual developer who are actually developing on 2 or 4 acre plot, they really cannot do much on the overall impact. If there is a heavy rain or what happened in Chennai or what happened in Mumbai, they have hardly any role to play because they are actually developing 3 to 4 acre of a zone development. So overall master planning is something which really should take care of all this issue. Now another point I really want to put here when our environmentalist friend said, okay, what happened in Chennai? See, these things are happening all over the world. What happened in Katrina? They were one of the smartest player in the world. What happened in New York when heavy snowfall happened? Or what happened in Mumbai when 1.2 meter of rain happened in 2 hours? So, natural calamity is never been designed. Let me tell you one thing. The very, very severest things are not been designed. And if you design that way, the cost of that designing is very, very heavy. So we really need to look at in a pragmatic manner.
No, but in those cases, one of the reason was not bad planning.
Happening in this
those disasters, the underlying reason was not bad planning.
Of the whole thing.
As Chennai was.
No, I think, Mayur, that we must accept that Chennai, we literally clamped down on all drainage system. It was extremely bad planning, and it's not the developers, it's literally the authorities and the city's governance failure. So let's not compare it to New York. I would be very, very hesitant in doing so because Chennai had a much bigger, larger problem of completely clogging all its drainage systems. Atul Chodia, your view?
I think this smart city which is there in the current form, the existing cities, we are only going to see some sort of a retrofitment and maybe marginal redevelopment. So to that extent, it can only improve the quality of life. If we really have to see the advantage of a smart city, then I see we will have to wait for Amravati. That would be the model to see. Unless a satellite city is going to be there with few hundred acres of a greenfield development with all sorts of technology and the environment aspect, I don't see anything great happening on account of satellite city. I mean the smart city. The smart city currently, let's say in Chennai, T Nagar could be one of the region. So in that area, probably some amount of retrofitment is going to be done. It can improve the life there. It is not going to be a major game changer that the life is going to change for something phenomenally great.
No. All right. So Tanmay, I'm going to conclude with you. Balance it out. I mean, the debate, we started out with one very, very simple observation that are there too many checks and balances when it comes to real estate housing projects and environmental clearances? Is the time taken too much? And can we ease out this process and also preserve the environment? Final word from you.
I think it's a big achievement that we've all agreed on one thing, that there needs to be, at the time of zoning or planning, a much bigger debate on environment at a macro level. But at the building level and the impact, the environmental impact of the building for the rest of its life is something that a developer has to take care of in terms of energy efficiency, water efficiency, treatment of sewage, waste, all these other issues, and they can be made as a prescriptive list which vary based on region, climate, urban and local area, given to the developer that these are the norms, just like any other law, that you must follow because they impact the construction process and the rest of the life of the building, and the larger environmental impact has to be taken care of before we allocate a building or a plot of land for any kind of development.
So for a developer, the responsibility should come at the building level,
building and at the site level,
at the site
absolutely.
level. But the larger problem here which needs to be resolved is zoning out and meeting all the environment norms at the master planning
Yeah, so
level.
if you have 100 acre and you know that 50 acre of that is a part of a watershed or a channel,
You should not
clearly at the time of selling that land, at the time of any transfer, it should clearly state that that area is not buildable.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to conclude on that note. It's a good solution. Well, preserving the environment is crucial, even in our quest for growth and providing homes for every Indian. So both need to be balanced out. We can only hope that the current environmental clearances, which are becoming a hindrance, go away at the site level, project level. Those processes need to be made faster for sure. Yet, it's every developer's responsibility also to ensure that every norm is met. Thank you very much for joining me on this discussion and debate.